President Bola Tinubu has presented the 2026 Appropriation Bill to the National Assembly. Of course, that's no longer news, setting out how government plans to fund growth, security and social development in the year ahead.
And the budget-themed consolidation, renewed resilience and shared prosperity spells out priorities and, more importantly, where the money is going.
Where the money is going. Defense and security leads the pack with 5.41 trillion naira, followed by infrastructure at 3.56 trillion naira, education at 3.52 trillion, and health at 2.48 trillion naira.
Well, these are the big ministries. And when we began this conversation on Monday, our guest expressed one thing clearly: the need for realistic, grounded projections, not just big numbers on paper.
Now, they emphasized the importance of honest oil and non-oil revenue assumptions, drawing from past shortfalls, and called for greater transparency in how intentions will translate into action.
And even as they welcome President Tinubu's words that the greatest budget is not the one presented, but the one implemented. They agreed that delivery will require realignments, strong incentives for private capital, and active buy-in from states and local governments.
I think that's what the real conversation is, really.
Exactly.
Having the states and local governments, on board. Now, so today we zoom in on sectoral allocations. What do these numbers really mean for security, roads, schools, hospitals, and everyday life for Nigerians?
And how do we ensure that these allocations drive development and not just deepen expectations? I am Juma Yusuf. Good to have you join us today on Good Morning Nigeria. The second for the week, and a very interesting topic at least. We have experts to break all the sectorial, allocations down.
Exactly, and I hope everyone stays put for this, because I mean it affects every one of us. So when we talk about the budget, it's about how does it affect me as an individual and a citizen of this country. So yeah,
and we're expecting our viewers to send in their
comments and questions
too. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just so they can be a part of the whole process. Me and Ray John, I wish you could see what my screen has for me, but. You know what we have to do. All right, you're live on the network service of the NTA. This is Good Morning Nigeria. And in case you do not know, this is the largest TV network in Africa. Joining us for the morning news is the one and the only. I like to call him that, Ibrahim Dan Hamidu.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. And to continue our conversation with brothers on the 2026 Appropriation Bill, let's take this excerpt from our previous discussion yesterday, as put together by Ibrahim Belogunda.
We need to do more oversight. Checkmate those people responsible in the management of the resources. That's implementation. We need to do more oversight.
The success of any budget lies on the implementation of the budget. Budget size is just, a numerical depiction of what the government aims to achieve in terms of, its priority focus area. And another thing is also the implementation of it, how the government is going to turn around and achieve all of this broad objective.
The greatest budget is the budget that we deliver. Okay, so that for me. And he also said something. He said that that we are going to spend, with purpose. We are going to spend with purpose, okay, and manage debt with discipline, and then also pursue growth that is broad-based. So these are some of the sound bites that I think should inform implementation of this budget, because at the end of the day, what matters is implementation.
I want to appreciate the president, at least, for coming to terms with the need to make the budget a lot more realistic, and for being very firm in saying that there has to be fiscal discipline. In order to grow the economy, we cannot run away from incentives. If you take the agricultural sector, for instance, if you want to address issues of food security, food sovereignty, resilience of the economy, you have to give some support to those who are investing in agriculture.
All right. Many thanks, Ibrahim Bello Gunda, for that package. Now joining us to continue our discussion on the 2026 Appropriation Bill. It's a pleasure to have with us right here in the studio Dr. Emeka Okengu, a development economist. Many thanks for joining us, sir.
Pleasure. Good morning. Nice to be here.
And we also have seated here in the studio Dr. Ni Akinsiju, Chairman, Independent Media and Policy Initiative and Financial Analyst. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. Compliments of the season, gentlemen.
Yeah, compliments of the season to you too, to Nigerians.
It's good to see you before the year runs out.
Yeah.
And so much talk. And, well, the budget is here. It has been presented to the National Assembly. Dr. Emeka, what do you make of it?
Well, first, let's first put on the table that this is a wish list, as it were, for now. Okay, that's why it's called a bill. And let's also take into context that the National Assembly now has a right to turn that whole thing all around. Okay, remove what they want to remove, put what they want to put, and then represent, to government for assent. So, in one word, budget is what it is, a financial plan that you have couched in figures. So, the most important aspects of this, document are the figures. And then when you're talking about the figures, a typical budget has two streams. One is the income, which is very, very important, and two will be now the expenditure, component of it. Yes, the four critical areas have been mentioned. Defense is getting one very huge chunk of money. Infrastructure is getting another very huge chunk of money. Social services and education is also getting, and then you have the health services. But as my opening, I think there are two critical factors. The President had mentioned it in the course of his presenting that budget, agriculture and food security. I thought that could have also made it, to the top five. Because as far as I'm concerned, until we get food secure, we can't get healthy. And until we get healthy, whatever else you're talking about, social inclusion, social infrastructure, and then even defense. Because under defense, and I'm resting on this as my opening, it is not just only the kinetic now. We're also looking at the non-kinetic, and this is where you're going to be finding a lot of agriculture, a lot of empowerment. And then the 1 million hectares of land under cultivation, maybe as we now drill down. But in all, kudos to the President for saying that at the end of March, we would not ever have multiple budgets running again in the country, and that every commitment is going to be met. That's quite relaxing for me.
Many thanks, Dr. Okengu, for your opening comments. I'd like to get to Dr. Akinsiju now. And, of course, I just want your opening comments, too. And maybe in simple terms, you can tell us what the 2026 Appropriation Bill, looks like to you. Would you say it's ambitious? Would you say it's realistic? Would you say it's risky?
Well, I think it's an expression of the President's undergoing what I call an economic epiphany, a new realization, of how practical, the budget should be. When you also, of course, look at some of the assertions, especially around the fact that this budget is not a promise, but a consolidation, of the gains of yesteryears. And more than that, that particular one that is said, this budget is not the one announced here, but the one delivered. And that struck me as being, as realizing the fact that, yes, budgets are like wish lists as described, but in fact, it's the one that is implemented that would be the actual, the actual budget. So, the promise of implementing and delivering on the promises of the budget, for me, it's indicative of a new thinking at the President. And of course, if we look at the MTF, the frameworks that determines the direction of the budget, what is also obvious is that there's a realization to come to terms with what is going on the ground, either in terms of at the level of the benchmarks, either in terms of the crude oil, quantity of crude oil production, price of crude oil, and of course the rates of the foreign exchange rate. For some people, the foreign exchange rate may still seem seem ambitious because we are still struggling to get to 1,004, and we want to assume that from January 2026, the our benchmark foreign exchange rate would be 1,400, and we see even now in December when the projection is that you have much inflow determined by dirty December and a number of other factors, that the rate should have come down, but you are seeing a lot of struggle around that threshold. But I think eventually, with the way transaction rates had also come down at the foreign exchange market, in 2025 especially, 1,600, beginning at 1,500 and something in January, and then under 1,500 in December, it will also be a strong indication that you would be able to, of course, achieve that 1,400 benchmark. But generally, I think the budget, as committed by the president, and I want to hold the president to trust, that this budget is possibly deliverable. It has all potential to be delivered. One, because the emphasis is on security. And that has been the major concern of all Nigerians, as it were. And I think understanding the context of the security by the president as saying that security is the basis of investment, as it were, and linking it up to general outlook in the country tells me that if much emphasis in truth and indeed is given to security, and we are able to save our roads, we are able to save our farmlands, we are able to save our borderlines and all that, I think things would generally, trigger, all possible positives in those aspects. So to a large extent, it's not too ambitious because the difference between 2025 and 2026 is just about 4-point-something trillion, 54 trillion to 58 trillion. So it's not, I don't see it as a major difference in terms of marginal increase. So largely, I think it's conservative enough, it's relatable, and of course, the prayer is that the promise turns to realization.
Indeed, Dr. Kwegu, we all know that the 2025 budget has not been fully implemented. Now we have the 2026 budget, and the government projects improved revenue performance. Now, from your own analysis, let's get it. How realistic are these revenue assumptions? And what happens if oil output, and the non-oil revenues fall short of projections there?
Well, the 2025 budget was fully implemented vis-a-vis the recurrent component. It was actually the capital component that wasn't implemented. And the president also gave the reasons for that, and this is why I'm going to come to your question. He says out of a projected revenue of 24 trillion, they could only get 18 trillion in, and the 18 trillion didn't come until the third quarter. So he made the implementation not go beyond 17%. When you're talking about the oil revenue, we should also talk about those who are supposed to manage these revenue streams for us. And for me, two agencies will come to mind, the NUPRIC and then the authority. Today, we have a seeming closure. He's resigned and he's left. Now, this is just putting a lead on what I think might be a very smelly lead. And then at the other level is even worse. Because if you look at what's happening in the social media now, it's awesome, it is messy. And I think this is happening because of two reasons. Reason number one is that by law, those two agencies were supposed to have boards. And you see that they operated for as long as they did as sole administrators, if you may, emperors. Because when you don't have that board that is supposed to be oversighting everything, approving whatever it is you're doing, then whatever oversight begins at the level of a board, because they're the ones who are supposed to be mounting that audit alert. So for me, the president's biggest challenge is revenue. And keeping the promises he's made will be against revenue, coming in. And then you are not just talking about oil sales now, Haja. I'm trying to pull us to, why in this sector at one time, the oil sector wasn't even, or oil and gas sector was barely bringing in $1 into the national kitty. And then you have this very huge 34 trillion, as your expenditure profiling. And then you even have, again, about 20-something trillion as deficit. So technically, you'll be needing to raise all this whole money, the whole 54 trillion in view. And if you don't raise it, or at least a substantial part of it, there's no way the president is going to be conjuring money from the skies. So I think the first thing we should do as a country is just not to keep talking about low revenue. He said, yes, going forward, everybody who's supposed to be helping us get this money in will be held accountable, because of the digital things and all that is going to put in place. But I also think we shouldn't just sweep what had happened in the past under the carpet, because there might still be some money or monies that can be recovered through maybe maladministration, through maybe wrong practices, through maybe things that are not done well, through maybe oil bid rounds, that were not properly conducted. So until we begin to know, because the president also mentioned transparency. And for me, in anything you want to do going forward, it is very important that these citizens, he says, the acknowledges have been, making a lot of sacrifices. It's all of us in this room. Now see that things are done the way they're supposed to be done. So to now come back to your question and answer very simply, yes, it is possible that we can be able to meet targets, but we're not going to be meeting targets, with prose. We're going to be meeting targets with very clear, inputs, revenue inputs that are going to be coming in. If that happens, it's going to be good. But until we're able to also now, like I keep telling you, do crime, do time. But don't wait for that crime to happen. Let's stop the crime before it happens. Now, how do you stop the crime before it happens? We need to set up very transparent systems of governance. We need to hold people very accountable. And I'm very particular about these two agencies because they are probably the most critical, in this revenue drive. If you don't have the prick, you have a beautiful soul, has good pedigree, that has been appointed as the CEO for the both, agencies now. However, putting a good man is not enough. Because it's like putting a cockroach to face judgment in a crowd of fowls. If you don't,
soldiers are critical.
If you don't also protect that queen bee, that produces all your honey. And how do you protect that queen bee? If the person is a good person, the management can actually push the person into some. So you need that oversight. You need that higher body to make certain that whatever the person does and does it right, he's protected or she's protected. Whatever he does and it is not done well, then the person is called out and then punished. But let's go back to even look at the people that were given this mandate to give us what they have done. And this is why they call audits. Sometimes when people hear audit, they panic. Audit is supposed to be something every official of government should look forward to, because that's how you can be able to say, I left there with clean records. So until we begin to get back that lexicon, and I'm sure your father told you that a lot. When I worked in service, I came out with clean records. That clean record is not because he said it, because there's an audit process that had shown clearly that he did what he was supposed to do, when he was supposed to do it, and how he was supposed to do it.
Many thanks, Dr. Okengu. You have raised up the issue of accountability and transparency. And going back to Dr. Akinshiju, when you spoke earlier, you talked about this appropriation bill being realistic and, can be delivered. But, listening to Dr. Okengu, so many issues, come to mind. And if you want to look at the content of the bill itself, with the huge deficit, you want to ask if we're budgeting for development or budgeting for debt. And also looking at the debt servicing, which takes a massive share of the budget. At what point does it actually become dangerous for the economy? To technically survive on debt?
To technically survive on debt, is to create or understand a different scenario from the fiscal we are looking at. Because I am trying to put it in the best way that I can that can transmit the fact. And the fact is simple, actually. We have run up a huge debt profile over the years. For whatever reasons, when we had resources, we did not apply resources the way we should. There was a time we paid off our debts, our foreign debts, between 2005 and 2006. We paid off close to 70% of our foreign debt. And beginning in that year, we started ramping up debt again. And that when you pay off debt, it presupposes the fact that you've earned so much to pay down your debt and, of course, to deploy resources, for development. But between 2006 and 2015, we had already, of course, at the foreign level, our debt had grossed up to $10 billion. And we are not talking of domestic debt here. And of course, by 2015, we entered into that glacier, glacier of global economic downturn that impacted Nigeria perhaps the most, because the price of crude oil that we depended on crashed. The quantity we were producing also crashed. And that's our reality. At that time, by 2015, we were producing an average of 2.3 million barrels a day. And the average rate was about $100 a day. So we want to wonder what we did with all the money accrued at that time. Then we entered this valley, as it were. The production fell between 2016, especially, and 2017, to a low of at a time 500,000. Then it graduated a bit to under a million. And through the Buhari years, it did not survive consistently on 1 million barrels a day. And at the same time, prices crashed to, at a point in time in 2016, to as low as $23 per barrel. So what I'm saying, at the time of national economic buoyancy, we did not employ, either we did not accrue our resources properly, we did not employ our resources properly, and we did not deploy the resources properly. So we found ourselves in a state of national deficit. And either we like it or not, if we are talking just of our roads, the federal government responsibility for road construction of 35,000 kilometers, how much money would need, to be deployed, to be employed, to construct those roads, for instance, to construct 10,000 kilometers of road, how much money do we need? So are we then now going to organically, grow our resources to develop? What time, how long will it take us to do this? So I think in bridging our needs, our developmental needs and our resources, that was why there has been a more emphasis on debt. Well, so it is now, what are we using the debt for? That, for me, is the question. Are we properly, sourcing the debts from where we are supposed to source them from? Are we properly, employing the debt in a way that it will impact development, so that when you invest in a particular project, and I think I align with the president's position that they want to invest in projects that are measurable and deliverable to time, so that you are not investing in a project that takes 10 years to mature, and you are not even benefiting from it in those 10 years. So essentially, I think that we have a need for debt now. And the truth of the matter is, it should be the engagement of all stakeholders in Nigeria to follow how debts are being secured, and how debts are being deployed.
If you say we continuously need the debt, at what point does debt stop being a growth tool to being a silent tax on future generations?
Yes, good question, because I was ruminating on what people talk when people talk about sustainability, perhaps not understanding the essence of sustainability. Sustainability essentially means that you create or you develop for today without impacting negatively on the future. But the truth is that if you do not also develop for today, you would impact the quality of life of the future. So it's important you are able to deploy appropriate resources to grow the economy now for the future. So if it is the debt that you need, because we are talking of revenue challenge here, we are talking of revenue limitations. And if you are talking of revenue limitations, it is revenue in one way or the other, properly, transparently managed, that can galvanize economic development and activities. So for me, if you have to secure debts as a tool for development, and that is the basis of development economics, Dr. Okongu is the expert here, if you have to secure debt to drive development, there's absolutely nothing wrong about it. But the catch there is it has to be secured transparently, it has to be deployed accountably, in a way that at the end of the day, it impacts the target people.
Can you give us an example of a country that followed this path of debt and succeeded?
America.
Yes, America.
America. It's a major concern now for them. Let's be truthful. The reality is that a lot of system had grown around the debt corridor in the U.S. A lot of system, a lot of culture, credit culture here. How do I call it? So many other industries that feed into the debt system. Yeah, it is a concern because we're talking of trillions of dollars here, but they still need more of the debt to keep it going.
But looking at the level of development and compared with Nigeria, would you say that we're headed in the right direction if we continue to go the debt path without looking for alternatives?
Ours is better because we are conscious. We are conscious of the limitations of debt.
Okay.
Yeah, we are conscious. We know that at a point in time, we need to start reducing. But that at this point in time, if we decide not to go the debt way, of course there are other options. Other economists will tell you that why don't you, of course, commercialize your assets? Why don't you take them to the capital market and all that? That's another option. But again, the easiest, more pragmatic option is the debt option as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, thank you so much. We've sort of established, what this appropriation bill aims to achieve. Now let's move to sectorial and sort of break it down, because security takes, a large chunk of the 2026 budget, Dr. Okongu. And does this level of spending sort of translate, to better outcomes on the ground?
Okay, so
because there's no development without security. Even the infrastructure that we're talking about, if there's no security, I don't think.
Let's put a context to security.
Yes.
Because there's so many securities. Okay.
So many securities.
So many. You have health security.
Yes.
You have food security. You have education security. You have infrastructure security. Okay. Then you have what it is we are talking about now, making certain that we are safe, from people. Marauders, criminals, terrorists, bandits, and even bandits in government. Now,
bandits in government.
Yes, there are also corruption security, if you may.
Help me understand it.
All right, okay. For anybody who is a bandit is somebody who has misused trust, who takes what doesn't belong to him. That's who a thief is. Okay? We are all here now, and then we'll go on break. He steps out and then comes back and her phone is missing.
We have a thief in the house.
That these are supposed to be very responsible people in the room, and this thing goes missing. Now, so is it with when you're entrusted with public trust. So when we're talking about security, we should also now talk about, administrative security, where you don't do the wrong things, when you're given a position of public trust. So security is almost everything and everyone. That's where you then now break it into which of the sections are you looking at. Now, if you're looking for economic, like rightly the president has stabilized the economy, you can give it to him. 8 consecutive terms of growth. Yes. But we've not grown to the point where we can now start pulling people out of poverty. And that's why the man in the street still says, okay, you guys have reduced rice to 50,000. I don't have 5,000. So I can't even go to start pricing it. Now, but this will happen if we're able to now grow to maybe 7.5% to maybe 8%, which is what is desirable and desired. But to focus on your question directly, security, the way it's been presented, seems to be the kinetic. All right, let's be able to get these guys off our soils. But I can tell you two things again. The more you kill, the more they come. If you don't understand the common shared, causes. Now, remember there's a report that says, and this was 10 years ago, that 20 million people, 24 million beasts, animals, were on their way from the Sahel, and they weren't going anywhere. They didn't know where they were. They knew where they were coming from, but they didn't know where they were going. So technically, as it were, you have a minimum of 10 million people who have come into your country. No plan, no destination, nothing. Some of them have come in from the Sahel. Most of them deranged. A lot of them with very sophisticated arms because of the Sahelian crisis of Libya and all that now allow them access to the armories after Libya, the Libyan president was taken out. This is important to get to that context. Because if you're going to be taking out 10 million people, you might be surprised that another 10 million are on their way coming. All right, so what it is that we must be able to have a comprehensive security plan, to be able to deal with both the kinetics, the security, the A, B, C, D, like I've tried to mention to you. So it is not big enough for me.
Oh, it's not big enough?
No, 5 trillion is paltry for what it is we're facing.
Considering what has been budgeted for security in the past years and what is visible on ground, insecurity hasn't reduced a bit. If you say we need more funding, then is it that we need to also check how transparency, you talked about transparency and accountability earlier. Do you think we need that in that sector?
Well, I think you've just used the right word, what we budgeted, not what we spent. Those are two different things, Yeri. You could budget 10 trillion and then have 100 billion. So what is important is not for you to interrogate what was budgeted. What you should be interrogating is what was spent. And what was spent is driven by two factors. One, revenue, and then two, debt. And I can tell you for something, everybody talks about debt. When you talk about two funding strategies or options, debt, equity, both are debt. Technically. Okay? Now, let me give you a typical example of what people call equity. Oh, my brother is starting a business. He comes to me, and okay, I'm going to be supporting him with #1 million. Now, that #1 million might be from your savings. Okay, it is family support. Now, if you drill it down, you expect it back, either in your brother, doing well, and then getting you off some family load, or returning your money. Now, but where debt becomes a little bit difficult, and I can say this, I don't mind you doing infrastructure. That infrastructure you cannot do in 3 years. And there's no critical infrastructure that you can get up and running that you need to attract investments in 3 years. One will be your rail infrastructure. In fact, the transport infrastructure is the most important infrastructure. Two will be your energy infrastructure. Okay? Now, these two infrastructure can take you a minimum of maybe 4 to 7 years to be able to get to a point where you can start generating investment interest. However, you don't need to spend public funds to be able to get this done.
How?
Beautiful. Now, there is what they call the resource-based support infrastructure development program, where actually the story of bonds, when you're talking about bond, okay, I'm bonded to you, hold on to this that belongs to me. And most of the times, if you look at how the Nigerian infrastructure development trajectory ran in the colonial times, it ran against our resources. And every infrastructure that was built across or along our along our natural resources or resources corridors. Okay? Now, but all of them were heading to the seaport using what we call in economics valorization. Now, but they needed to come in volumes. This will take another 1 or 2 hours for me to explain to you. But what is important for us to know is that even if we are going to be doing 1 trillion And let me also say this. Nigeria has 3 billion metric tons of coal, 5 billion metric tons of iron ore, for instance, tons and tons of other materials. Let's just use these two materials. Now, in situ value of coal is about $200 inside the ground.
Inside the ground?
Yes. Now, when you bring it out, I think it's about 1,000. I don't know how much it is now. Now, imagine a situation where you're able to now use 1 billion tons of coal or iron ore to be able to now raise, funds for infrastructure development. It is called the load value system. Okay? Now, where you come from, Jumai, has blue copper. There's a place in Bauchi they call Ligi Hills. It's a hill. It is 80% barite. Now, if you step down Ligi Hill, the first thing you're going to be seeing there is a major rail line that was taking those materials, straight to the seaport as barite and returning them into Nigeria as barium sulfide. Places like Guyuk, has the best limestones. Yeah. Now, if you're doing, I was in the Bauchi Economic Summit, 2 months ago, and a guy, Dr. Abbas, I mentioned his name publicly, had found 500,000 metric tons of limestone in Bauchi. And in front of everybody, had written a check of over 300 billion in that summit. He's alive. He wants to start, producing what they call resident cement. I think that's his company. So if we go the resource way, Nii had talked about assets. Now, these are part of our assets. Now, this is where ministries like agriculture, ministries like science and technology, if you know what assets they have, if they commercialize those assets they have, for instance, under one of their agencies alone, in Ministry of Science and Technology, they have 47 bioresources centers that can support biotechnology.
Across the country?
Across the country, or in every part of the country. So part of what I'm trying to say is that when we're looking at development and looking at revenue and looking at infrastructure, we need to be measured. We need to have a holistic plan. In fact, to the extent that Nigeria must be able to present what we need as a nutrition intake on a daily basis. Now, that will be able to support when you're producing cassava, when you're producing yam, when you're producing maize, when you're producing cowpea, how much of this do we need to be able to set up an industry? I'll rest on this, I don't take a lot of time.
From what you're saying, it means that we can survive without going the debt way.
We can survive without going the public debt way.
Okay.
Because you see, by the time you're also doing this, your resource-based is also debt. Because somebody needs to help you to do those studies, somebody needs to help you to do the evacuation. So because it's against that, you're going to now be borrowing money. Okay? And I had done very extensive studies on this. Okay? So it's easy, Iyari, but it needs very careful, purposeful, synergized thinking. And this is, again, maybe if we have chance, in the course of this conversation, I do not see why in education you do not see the Ministry of Science and Technology sharing a common budget with education, water resources, agriculture. Okay, then supported by Science and Tech. The Minister of Science and Tech, for me, I keep saying this, or Ministry of Science and Tech is actually the most important ministry at this time.
Moment in time.
Now, we're supposed to be shouting, preaching, practicing, living reverse engineering. So when we say grow what you eat, now we should also wear, what we produce. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like we used to before. So these are very simple issues, but it needs purposeful thinking, and we shouldn't be in a hurry. The president has laid the foundation. History will record him very kindly for that. But I think, this is us. We had $12 billion, and I was against that thing at that point in time. And we took $12 billion in cash and went and gave to somebody that have paid our debt. And I said, what's this? Now, we have not solved our infrastructure projects. We have not solved our social needs. And you take a chunk of 12 billion, and then the person says, okay, I'll take this at 12 billion at 70% of your credit, and then write it off. And then they return the 12 billion to you again, and you're now owing 30-something trillion or whatever trillion we're owing. How does that make sense?
How does that make sense, indeed?
You mentioned education while you spoke, and that takes us to the budget for education. Dr. Akinshiju, I'll come to you now. Education is allocated about 3.52 trillion naira. Health gets 2.48 trillion. Now, do these figures align with Nigeria's human capital crisis at this time, as well as global benchmarks?
Yeah, definitely not with global benchmarks. But I think the reality for me is you cannot also address the challenges of education and health, in Nigeria in a single budget cycle. And without also canvassing an excuse for the federal government, I think the management of education and health, are divided into the tier system, the federal tier system in Nigeria. So much that I think more of responsibility for education within the local government and the state government, either for education or for health. What I know for certain is that the oversight and the conduct of primary education are principally within the purview of local government administration. But I think there's a need to generally understand the essentials of our federal system in the fiscal space. Health, for instance, too. If you're talking about primary health and secondary health system to a large extent, it's also within the purview of the local government and the state government. And I think this is one of the reasons the president has been canvassing for an independent, autonomous local government system, so that the local government have enough resources to realize the responsibilities at that level. The primary school system is the foundation of education, and if you don't have enough resources to drive that system, you have, of course, the whole foundation. The whole system built on a faulty foundation. So I think to a large extent, what the federal government does at the level of education and health is at the tertiary level, and of course creates principled direction, for the states, for secondary school and the local government, and primary school. The excitement for most people at the federal level is the unity school. The unity school is principally just an intervention, but we see again, because the Nigerian federal system also feel or deem it appropriate to support the states and the local government. That's why we have the SUBEB. The SUBEB is an interventionist agency, but how do they now also, of course, conduct that business of intervention in the state and the local governments? That's the question for me, because I know over time so much trillions had actually been disbursed to these tiers of governments, and we are yet to see more. The kind of results that we expect. So 2.5 health. For me, I think if there's even a huge, concentric investment in tertiary health system at the federal level, and the business of conducting primary health system is properly, seriously conducted at the level of the local government, we will find that there will be a symmetry over time. Because why do people travel out for what you call the health tourism? It's because of lack of specialized interventions, health interventions in Nigeria. So if the federal government indeed makes it a principled position to have centers of excellence at the tertiary level, it will go a long way in assuaging some of our challenges. And the same thing with education. So what I'm trying to say essentially is that we should not look at health, education, at that narrow prism of being a federal government responsibility. It is actually percolated across the three tiers of government.
Exactly. Yesterday when we were having this conversation, our guests were, having on, the subnationals, contributing to development infrastructure because they get a huge amount of money every month. And I like the fact that President Tinubu is telling the governors you cannot continue to withhold local government funds because those are the people that are closest to the people at the grassroots. And then when everything starts from the grassroots, improvement comes up. Now, yesterday they also made a point about government not able to do it alone, Dr. Okongwu. They talked about public-private partnership with government to be able to raise these revenues and reduce pressure on government finances. What's your take?
Well, first you need to run Nigeria as a whole if that's going to be working. Because what you now have is that you have 2 tiers or 3 tiers that are 2-tiered. Now you have state assemblies passing laws that do not, sometimes run in conflict with the programs of the federal government, especially when it comes to areas like agriculture. Now it's important we look at primary education because that's actually where our problem is as a country. Now, you know that the local governments have been subjugated, technically. They are not independent. They have never been. They will never be. Because a lot of the monies that go to states, and people don't know why, goes to the local government, is accounted to the local government. So if you give the state governments, the local governments, their monies directly, you find out that when you aggregate that money, the state government will have nothing. So they need that joint partnership to be able to get some funding to now say, okay, we're going to be doing common shared infrastructure. But what is painful in all this is that we are talking about primary education. We are not talking about the teacher component of it. Now, if you remember, in those days, you used to have the WTCs, the women teachers or teacher training colleges, coming to primary schools to do their teaching practice. And it was such fun that you had your PEs or PTs, depending on which area and time you were born. You had primary schools as centers of excellence. Everybody who was in a primary school, I'm sure you weren't born then, had school farms.
I was born.
Okay, maybe I didn't. In this country. So the primary education was so foundational, was so important that it prepared you at primary level. You knew who was going to be a doctor. You knew who was going to be a pharmacist. Everybody loved and liked school. Now, for anybody to deliberately or by whatever means leave that component to people you know are not empowered, how do you give a man without limbs a baby to carry? This man does not have any hands. And you're saying, please, my baby is falling, help me carry the baby. Now, that baby is going to hit the ground very hard. And this is what it is we've gotten ourselves into. But the PPP, what's a PPP? A PPP is a private, public-private partnership. Now, there are also laws that govern it. Okay? Maybe a lot of people also do not know that most things that come out of public, institutions do not go beyond research by law. So you see a lot of government agencies that have spent so much money, they are restricted by law by commercializing it. So if you're doing a PPP, first and foremost, you need to come and look at the laws. And getting that law or getting that agreement passed is like walking through, a camel through the eye of a needle, because I have gone through it. In fact, one of the projects we were trying to run, we ended up in the SSS. They did a lot of vetting, they did this, they did that. You stay, go to Ministry of Justice for vetting, go to this for, and sometimes it takes you 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And then there are other countries that are waiting for the same programs, the same projects, and then they are now offloading into your country as an off-taker country. So I think the government also has to take a deliberate policy, a fact policy on now saying every MDA that has something to offer or must show something it can offer, and then make it public for those who can be able to help them build on it. I have a compendium from ARCN, 3 volumes of compendium. I'm saying this on national TV, more than 5,000 research outputs. Compendium. Now, a lot of the things there are the things we're buying from China and from India and from this other, from crops to technologies, to machinery, to equipment, to whatever, done in this country, done out of our 60 research institutes. But you cannot now go and get into a partnership with them because of these legal restrictions that I've just mentioned. So in trying to unlock Nigeria, the first thing we must do is to look at how the states and the federal government are able to synergize their laws. Their laws, and this is important, not policy. Because when a state assembly passes a law and is in conflict with what the federal government is doing, there's a jam. That, okay, federal government wants to do 1 million hectares of land. Now, the federal government doesn't have it anywhere. That land is at the state level. If that land that they are expecting to use have been allocated for housing, they won't get it. In all, I don't even think the federal government has up to 100,000 hectares of land under any program in this country. So, and if that synergy is not there, you see that you have now created a very big hole. So it's one thing, like I said, it's a wish list, but there's a lot of work to be done here for you to be able to get a proper. You can get PPPs, but for you to be able to get one that works, 2 that is sustainable, 3 that will now return to what you call the common good.
Many thanks, Dr. Okengu. By the way, Jume and Dr. Okengu, thank you for the age-based dismissal. I will respond after the show. But now that you have talked about my generation, I mean, we also have a stake in all of this. You have talked about the things that you guys saw. Well, there are things we are not seeing now. You have not seen. And we have not seen, and we want to see. So we can actually be able to share your history with our present. And when we talk about that, this particular appropriation bill claims to promote shared prosperity. Now, what exact budget lines directly supports youth employment and poverty reduction?
Well, I think generally you look at the capital component of the budget at 26.8 thereabouts trillion. I think again compared to recent budgets, it's not a bad percentage of the budget, because for me, my advocacy long before now had been that we've had times when we had more percentage of the allocation to recurrent debts, and then of course compared to capital. If you had recurrent and debt, now it's still higher than capital, but there's a relative difference. 15 trillion recurrent, 15 trillion debt, 30 trillion, 26 trillion capital. I think it's still impressive. So the guarantees of jobs would translate to the fact that you have more of these capital components of the budgets implemented. Construction, infrastructure, social, health, and the health we are talking about, the 2.4 we are talking about, is the capital component of the health, the health budget. Which one is that? The infrastructure, infrastructure at 3.56 is also that aspect will impact job creation because road constructions mostly, would be impacted. And if you are able to do 80% of that, I know it will also impact job generation. For me, the economy over time had not been producing enough jobs. So I desire we have a budget that will trigger that. But the reality again is that you do not address the challenges of limited job creation in the economy in a budget cycle. And it is not just only the responsibility of the federal government. It is the responsibility of all the 3 tiers of government. We come back to the issue, to the autonomy of local government. I remember while growing, and I'm not referencing you now, I remember while growing, we used to have contractors in the local government area. We used to have what you call our own models, who were responsible for constructing roads, for clearing gutters and all that. And they were wealth creators in their own right within that ecosystem. And it impacted people in the environment. So they had no need to go to the state. In fact, some of them don't even know the road to the state capital. They were there and they were seen and those who were leading to prosperity in the local government, and they were impacting people. So when you have that kind of environment, it democratizes prosperity, as it were. What we have now is what I call the highway economy, or highway prosperity. Everything you see that creates wealth in Nigeria now are on the highways. And the highways, people at the grassroots don't even know the road to the highways. So there's a need to find growth, resources, go down to the basics. The states too, there had not been strong advocacy around the state, being responsible, being accountable for the resources they get. For every items we talk, the basic human items, infrastructure, health, schools, agriculture, social protection, and all that, they are supposed to be replicated in the commanding ways we expect them at the federal government in those other two tiers. Except when we have a synergy of growth pattern, amongst these three tiers, we won't be able to have the desired vision when it comes down, especially job creation. For me, job creation is very, very important. And it is obvious that not everybody will come and get job in Abuja. Not many people will come and get job in the 36 states capitals. You need people to get jobs within their neighborhood. In fact, when you live within 200 square meters of your neighborhood and you find a job within that square meter, you are able to raise your family, within that 200 square meters. You are able to live and retire within that 200 square meters. It does translate to the fact of prosperity when we are able to achieve that scenario.
Yes, we're able to achieve that. When I talk to young people, I'm not cutting you out there, Jerry. When I talk to young people, usually I tell them that during our time, we got employment like free. We're on break from school, like long vacation. Already jobs are waiting for us to just go, to any organization. You just say you want to do, your part-time job before you go back to school. And they were available. And I begin to wonder. And they tell me that you've seen the better. Since we were born, we've not seen anything different from insecurity, poverty and all that. Now, we need reforms to change all this, Dr. Okengo. And reforms indeed are needed, beyond funding to see real impact, in these sectors that we've just mentioned through this budget. How can we begin to retrace ourselves to make sure that these young people coming up have something to do? An idle mind is a devil's workshop.
Thank you so much, Jumba. There's an agency they call the NDE.
Yes.
If that agency was doing its job, you would rather be working there than work in NNPC. Because that agency is actually supposed to be the engine room of this PPP, social inclusion, job creation that we're talking about. But I probably think, I don't know, I don't work there, that is one of the least funded, least empowered, least paid, of all the agencies, and then least busy. From time to time, you might be lucky to see a workshop, they try to launch something, get one or two people together, and then that's it.
Retreat for staff.
Beautiful. I had, and I'm going to be sharing that video with you. I did something in Kuje in Abuja. I started growing cassava in bags, and I was growing off-season. Now, we just did a trial harvest 1 week ago. When I shared that video amongst myself, they say, so yam can do well in bags. I said, no, that's not yam. That is cassava, and that was grown off season. Our next target is a place like Maiduguri and Kano. Now, hear me. If you have, Tanzania today as we speak, has beat food security by 128%. They did it by focusing on what it is I tried to preach 10 years ago again, to say establish community-based, climate-smart centers of excellence that we begin to now look at your agro and allied resources. Now, what does this mean? There is no place on earth that cannot grow food with technology. So move from this concept of farming and move into the concept of food production. That way, you can now start getting beautiful, well-dressed, educated people like Uyeri to go to those centers. And I make it a point, anytime I'm going to my center, I try to wear white dresses. It's in Kuje in Abuja here.
Yes, you said so.
And I've tried to take one or two agencies of government after I've done that harvest to say, this is what we now need to begin to now create partnerships that can create jobs. Now, you are asking, where is the youth involved in this budget? It is in the health and social services sector. But instead of now social services driving investment, we are now doing social services as humanitarian services. This is where we're getting it wrong.
Yeah.
So every month, somebody gets an alert of 10,000. And you say, oh, you have supported the person. You have supported laziness.
During that time, we worked for the money.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Now, whatever it was you do, I have a deal, with my own kids. If we can do an engagement, this is where I mentioned equity. I'm going to be giving you some money. It's not a loan. It's my support. But when you get this money back, this is what I expect you to do. Get yourself a pair of shoes, get yourself this, get yourself that, get yourself this. You haven't gotten that money back, but you have gotten value. Now, what now happens, Uyeri, is that and again, we fail to understand that one business that the law allows you to do as a newscaster is food production. Call it, so that it can even give you some kind of class. I've told my friends in Maiduguri, and I'm saying this to you now publicly, give me land where I can put cassava in bags, where I can put yam in bags. It's all about the soil. It's all about the substrate. It's all about water. It is not about rain. And for a place like Maiduguri, that the dams keep overflowing and killing people, that water can be managed to feed the whole of Maiduguri, and then they begin to now feed other Maiduguri. The same thing with Yobe, because they're on the same, belt. So the point I'm trying to make is that we can rethink Nigeria, but it has to be deliberate. It is not going to be, putting a lot of pressure on the president, because everybody expects him. I sometimes, like if you listen to him, he came out plainly he was open to Nigerians to say, I understand what is going on. Contractors have done work. They haven't been paid. We have a lot of infrastructure that hasn't been done, but I'm going to be assuring you that this won't happen again. This is where the pressure on him gets worse. Can I tell you why? Because if he's not able to raise the revenue, he is not going to do magic. Now, he wants to go and borrow the money. Everybody gets on social media and starts calculating how much you are owing. Then you go to bed hungry. You will not start blaming him for not being able to provide food.
Many thanks, Dr. Okengu. We need to pause now. I mean, so many things to think about. I'm sure even our viewers have, some comments or questions that they would like us to ask our guests right here in the studio. So we look forward to receiving them. The messages are on the screen. So we'll take a break now. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation. Stay with us. All right, many thanks for remaining with us. It's still Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the NTA. Our guests are still very much with us, and of course, we're discussing the 2026 Appropriation Bill. And before we went on that break, so much has been said already. And
we're still expecting comments from our
comments from our viewers and all of that, so we'll get to read. But you see, while we're talking about this budget, at the moment it's at the National Assembly. We said some things are okay, some things need to be adjusted, but maybe we should also bring to the fore the adjustments, or if you like, the likely padding that that we've seen, in previous budget cycles. Or some say, well, it's not padding, some say it's political insertions. I don't know what the right term is, but speak about that. Speak about that, really. Should we be concerned about that? And then for the average Nigerian, I'm sure that's why we're finding it difficult to get messages, because they can't relate with the budget, right? Some say it deepens inequality. Some say the budget is just for those at the top. They understand what's going on with it. Those at the bottom have lost touch, in terms of budgets and all of that. But speak to us. Do you think that with this appropriation bill, we're likely to see something different in 2026?
Well, to the extent of the commitment made by the president, to say this is not just a promise, it is what he's going to deliver. It's not just a bunch of figures that he plans to deliver on these figures. To that extent, we can, of course, hope in the context of in the spirit of renewed hope, that it will be different. But for me, I think there have been this ongoing debate over the powers of the National Assembly, to tweak with the budgets, the size sometimes, and some further insertions, especially what we all popularly know as the constituency projects, sometimes the obvious misalignments in those projects, where you have the construction of a town hall building inserted in the budget of Ministry of Women Affairs, where you have solar poles and all that inserted in the budget of the budget of health, So you see those misalignments. What they reflect, it's on seriousness, and on professionalism, and it makes the whole document funny, looks funny, So my appeal to the National Assembly: you have a right. The constituency project is okay. There's nothing wrong about it. It's about targeting the constituency. It's still about impacting the people. But if you are going to do them, frame them properly, insert them where they should be, and of course allow people who have the capacity to execute and implement them. You are using the word padding because, yes, it reflects padding. When a project is not supposed to be somewhere and it's there, it's padding. It shows fraudulent intent in the first instance, And then we have now also monitored, the implementations of this project post-harvest. Post-budget. So you have inserted so much projects. At the end of the day, what are the percentage of the project that had been delivered? And how have this project, of course, impacted the targeted people? And I think for me, it's also important to continue an audit, of these projects, especially. Most of the times when I see the presentation, or when I witness the presentation of a budget, I see the reaction of members of the parliament, especially when it comes to capital. And what that tells you is that their concern is their own, capital spheres as inserted into the budget. So, and what that reflects is two words, as you put it. You have two words in that budget: the words of the federal government, the executive arm, acting on behalf of the people, and the words of the members of parliament, either acting on behalf of their constituency, but that is questionable, because the passion with which they respond to this does not show that it's just about the people. It's seeming as if it's about their own personal interest. So to a large extent, I wish, one, that the National Assembly members would moderate, the way they also debate and, of course, create a new. Sometimes you find a budget when it is an output budget that is different from an input budget. Input in the sense that the budget that was presented to the National Assembly is generally different from the one that was passed by the National Assembly. So I think there should be that alignment. There should be that seeming symmetry between what the president had delivered and what the National Assembly is passing, so that we don't see different documents at the end of the day.
different documents at the end of the day. Now, historically, Dr. Okongo, budget performance has always been a challenge, sort of, in Nigeria. So what are the biggest risks now? We're talking about implementing the 2026 budget.
The biggest risk for me is not having a post-budget approval, if you may, FSP, or whatever document you're going to call it. Because remember that the MTEF is a 3-year plan, okay? And then it goes into this system and, of course, gets aligned, realigned, padded, repadded for whatever is what. And then it comes out probably sometimes as a different, you now have insertions, you now have bloating, you rarely have it shrinking. Okay, you always have it, so new things have been inserted. Now, I think the first challenge is to now begin to run with those new things without aligning them. So if you had a system where the moment, that final figure is agreed between the National Assembly and the executive. Now, the same people that now filled those windows, put in those proposals, brought it in, should also sit down and then develop what you can call an implementation plan. That implementation plan will now be where you can now be able to, milestone. You understand what I'm saying? Where clearly we'll now begin to now look at our revenue sources, the ones that are going to be cast back, the one that might be fired, so there's a document that begins to now, flag where you might have some environment. So it becomes clear to everybody that this is where we are going to. That's the first level of transparency. But when you now you wake up and like, Nia just said, you're looking at your budget and you're seeing a library. You're seeing Islamic Christian center. And then where is this going to come from? And because these programs have to put under the departments and directorates, now the man doesn't know where that is coming from. So his struggle is now to be able to now make certain that whoever that needs to now carry out that program now does it well. This is where the first shock, this is where the first anger, this is where the first friction, begins to come in. Some people might say to you, if this is going to be under my department, I need to do it right. Some other person says, that thing you're doing there is constituency project. Now, that's also alien for me. And I think it came in during that 2015 period. It's never been part of what it is we are doing. You have a budget, you have a budget. And I think going forward too, the presidency might also now consider some consolidated funding program so that members of the National Assembly who need to show, some level of, okay, this is what I'm doing, we now present programs that will be first, needs-based, okay, and result-oriented. So that there's also, yes, we allow you this, but it needs to now fall into the national program of needs, okay, and outputs and results. Now, it makes it a lot easier for you to also monitor. But when you have a situation where somebody says, my constituency, I'm going to buy in 2 million bags of rice, to share, and the money is allocated for 2 million bags of rice, and everybody in the constituency is saying, we didn't see the rice, so some are saying, we saw it in the market. Now, health is both critical and social. In some areas, a health center will be critical infrastructure. In some areas, it will be social infrastructure. So if you don't also now align, and what I'm saying to you, a lot of thinking has to go into us getting out of where we are. There's a culture to say, oh, the budget, everybody is busy. How much is allocated to this? How much is allocated to this? Then contractors being paid is again another very major issue. If you want to also now have the best, make certain that the man gets what it is he's supposed to get when he's supposed to get it. At one time, I think they said they were now going to be issuing certificates to make certain that you don't award any contracts that the money is not there. This was a policy of government, I think, in the past 1 or 2 years. But now you also see contractors, blocking the streets.
Protesting.
That they haven't been paid anything. So, and nobody has been questioned. Nobody has been sacked. This now comes to enforcement. Now, the moment you do the right thing, you get an applause. You do the wrong thing, you take the fall. Because every mistake that is being made by public officers, unfortunately, is hitting at the president. Nobody remembers that DG who didn't pay him. Everybody says, oh.
It's not what they remember, even the governor.
Yes, it's him.
Yes, it's the president.
So until he begins to also wield not only just the big stick, when they wield the big stick, you now come and be accountable. Because it is what it is. When you want to get into public office, the first thing you know is that you no longer have your life. Okay, we'll ask you questions, you answer. That's what public office is all about.
Many thanks, Dr. Okengo. You talked about public office, and you just brought up a question in my head about the recurrent in this budget being put at 15.25 trillion naira. So the question is the cost of governance growing faster than economic productivity?
It's even moderated now.
So we're coming from a bad place.
It used to be higher than, just like I noted earlier, it used to be higher than total capital budgets, it is not proper. It should continue to give us cause for concern. Because when you talk of that 15 trillion plus, you are talking of an economy that is restricted by definition itself. You can count the numbers of beneficiaries, direct beneficiaries too here, of that 15 trillion. You can count the numbers. And 80% of that number are situated in Abuja. So it tells you, how do you now start comparing? How do you start relating that with the larger population of Nigeria across the country? So recurrence it's proper. You have properly put it in context. That it captures the cost of governance. And then again, what are the values tied to that cost? What are the outcomes? What manner of efficiency, would that cost avail the country? So we must also start questioning that. We are allocating this much, to governance. What exactly will be the benefit, to the people eventually? What's the channels? Are you creating new channels for efficiency, for convenience, and all that? And yesterday, I saw. I think it's a committee on public sector reforms, and I was impressed. They did a grading of the websites of
different MDAs.
I was like, this is very good. In fact, it was not, yes, they said it was not a shame and name and shame thing, but it allows us to see those MDAs that were responsible, to their mandates. Because in today's world, if you are a government institution, the minimum you can have is a relatable website, and that's the kind of cost of governance we are talking about here. What manner of personnel do we have in government that are delivering the mandate of government to the people? So I think that the cost, yes, people will have to earn salaries, there should be allowances, there should be provisions for movement of personnel and all that. There should be.
When you said allowances,
okay, it has been collected.
I don't get allowances. I don't. In fact, I want some in 2026.
Well, there's no doubt there's the need for it. It's also part of incentivizing your workforce. Yes. But the important thing is, what are the values tied to that? We have always looked at the allocation. We have not asked for values. So at this time, you are doing this much, you are collecting this much. What are you bringing to the table for us? What are you bringing to the table? Indeed, Dr. Kongwe, enough. As we round up now, in just one sentence, what is the biggest strength of the 2026 budget and what is the biggest weakness?
The president's determination to see it through. That's the biggest strength. Maybe.
But that's just words. How does it translate?
Yes, it does. That's where the weakness will come now. His ability to follow through, with saying that he is going to put everybody who's supposed to be doing things on their toes. If he's able to do that, that will be the biggest strength, because indeed he can. Indeed he can. If he puts if he goes to sit on everybody's head and neck, and then make certain that we'll now have results based outputted revenue inputs and then, project outputs. That would be the way to go for me.
All right. As we round off, 30 seconds, Dr. Akinshiju, what role do you think the civil society and the media should be playing in all of this?
Well, the civil society had actually been up and doing in federal budgets. Even the media, you saw after that, after the presentation everywhere. But what about, of course, what about the state? What about the local governments? Because as a federal system, we should be looking at all these tiers in totality. While we differentiate them at the point, at the other end, we should aggregate. What as Nigeria, the Nigerian system or the Nigerian government, tiers of government, had allocated to education as a whole? First we look at the total budget size of the country. So we are looking at 58 being the budget size for federal. What is the budget size for the states, 36 states, including Abuja? What's the budget size for the 774 local governments? If we had them, would it be impressive enough? What manner of result would you get from this total? Now, if we also now start disaggregating them, what is the percentage of the budget to education across the country? So we should look, it's a federal system. It is not a federal government. That's the way we should start looking at the Nigerian nation.
Okay, Dr. Ni Akinshiju, I believe we'll be having this conversation when the budget is passed, by the president. I will be able to break it down and see how it goes. Dr. Ni Akinshiju, Chairman, Independent Media and Policy Initiative and Financial Analyst. As always, it's been an immense pleasure having you in the studio to help us break down the budget, sectorial budget. Dr. Emeka Okengwu, Development Economist, we appreciate you. And I believe I told you with time I'll come and learn how to do that kind of farming. And that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. Thank you so much for being part of it. And on behalf of the production crew, thank you for your time. I am Joma Yusuf.
It's coming down to Christmas. Stay safe. And remain tuned to the NTA. I'm Henry John.